My mom wants me to marry my creepy stepbrother and have his child. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. Poke. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking of the wall clock. Emily had been scrolling through her phone on the couch, half asleep, when she heard her mother's laugh from the kitchen. It wasn't the usual laugh. It was sharp, almost giddy. She frowned, curiosity tugging her up from the cushions. She padded toward the kitchen, moving slow so the floorboards wouldn't creak. Linda's back was to her, phone pressed to her ear, voice low but clear enough for Emily to hear. She'll be perfect for him, Linda was saying, words soaked in amusement. If she has his baby, we're set for life. Emily froze, the breath catching in her throat. Carl's deep voice came through the receiver, muffled but obvious. They were talking about Brian, Carl's son. Emily's skin prickled. Her mind snapped back to every time Brian had made her uncomfortable. The way his eyes lingered when she wore shorts, the way his jokes always crossed the line, the time he accidentally walked in on her while she was in the shower and didn't leave right away. She stepped fully into the doorway. What the hell are you talking about? Linda turned, surprised for only a second before her face smoothed into something cold. You shouldn't sneak up on people, Emily. You just said. Emily's voice shook. You want me to be with Brian? To have his kid? Are you insane? Linda rolled her eyes and waved a hand like Emily was being dramatic. Don't twist my words. He's a good match. You're not exactly swimming in options. And you do owe me. Emily blinked, not sure she'd heard right. Owe you? For everything, Linda said, her voice sharpening. I raised you alone after your father walked out. I put food on the table, kept a roof over your head. Now it's time you do something for me. Emily's stomach turned. Something for you? You want me to marry your creepy stepson so you and Carl can cash in? Linda's mouth curved into a thin smile. Watch your tone. Carl and I have been good to you. Brian can give you stability, and you can give him what he wants. The words made Emily feel sick. She stepped back, her pulse hammering. I'm not doing this. Linda shrugged, like it was already decided. You will. You'll see it's for the best. Emily backed into the hallway, every muscle tense. She could still hear her mother's voice as she turned away, low and dismissive, as if Emily's future and her body were nothing more than bargaining chips. The quiet apartment suddenly felt like a trap. Brian started showing up more often after that night. At first, Emily thought maybe it was a coincidence. He dropped by for dinner or to help Carl with something. But it became too regular to ignore. 3 nights in a row, then a whole weekend where he was there from morning until late. Every time he visited, Linda found a reason to leave Emily in the same room with him. She'd suddenly need to grab something from the store or ask Carl to help her in the garage. Brian would sit too close on the couch, his knee brushing hers, or follow her into the kitchen and stand in the doorway like he was watching her every move. Emily tried to keep her distance, but the walls of the house felt smaller each day. One afternoon, Carl cornered her while Brian was upstairs. He leaned against the counter, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. You've got a lot of debt, don't you? He said casually. Emily's hands tightened on the dish she was drying. I'm paying it off. Carl tilted his head. I could take care of it. Wipe it clean. You'd never have to think about it again. All you'd have to do is work with us on that. The words made her chest tighten. I'm not for sale, she said, but her voice came out thinner than she wanted. Carl's smile didn't change. Think about it. Then he walked away like nothing had happened. That night, Emily called Rachel. They met at a small coffee shop near Rachel's apartment, far from Linda and Carl's neighborhood. Emily kept her voice low as she explained how Brian was suddenly everywhere, how Carl had hinted about her debt. Rachel's expression darkened. This isn't normal, Em. They're trying to trap you. You need to be careful. Emily nodded, grateful someone understood. But when she got home later, Linda was waiting in the living room. I saw you with Rachel, Linda said, her tone clipped. What were you talking about? Just catching up, Emily replied. Linda crossed her arms. She's jealous. Always has been. She doesn't want to see you happy, so she's filling your head with lies. Emily frowned. She's my friend. She's toxic, Linda snapped. If you can't see that, you're blind. I don't want her in your ear anymore. Over the next week, Linda kept making small comments about how Rachel never had her life together or how she didn't care about Emily's future. It wore her down. When Rachel texted a few days later, Emily stared at the message for a long time and didn't reply. Brian's visits continued, and now Emily felt completely alone in the house. Even when Carl and Linda were there, it was like they were all part of some plan she couldn't escape. Every room felt heavier, every conversation sharper, and Rachel, the one person she could trust, was slipping away because her mother wanted it that way. The first text came just after midnight. Emily had been half asleep, phone face down on the nightstand, when it buzzed. Can't stop thinking about you. She stared at the screen, uneasy. There was no name, but she didn't need one. The way it was written, the timing, it could only be Brian. She didn't respond. The next night, another message came. We make such a great pair. Then it's only a matter of time. Emily turned her phone off and shoved it in a drawer, but the messages kept coming during the day too. Miss you already. We'd be perfect together. She blocked the number, but then they started coming from another. A few days later, Carl and Linda hosted a dinner for family friends. Emily thought maybe she could stay quiet, eat, and leave early. But halfway through, Brian stood, glass in hand, and tapped it for attention. I just want to say, he began, smiling wide, how happy I am to welcome Emily to the family, in more ways than one. The room went quiet for a beat before a few guests let out awkward laughs. Emily felt the heat rise in her face. Linda smiled like nothing was wrong. Carl smirked. Brian sat back down next to her, leaning in just close enough for her to smell the wine on his breath. You'll get used to the attention, he murmured. Emily didn't speak the rest of the night. When she finally got home, she went straight to her room, ready to lock the door and block the world out. But something caught her eye. On her pillow, there was a folded piece of paper. She opened it slowly, her hands shaking. Inside, in thick black ink, were the words, "You'll make a perfect wife." Her first thought was that it had to be Brian. No one else had been in her room, and it was his kind of unsettling, smug message. She glanced toward the hallway, but it was empty. She crumpled the note in her fist and shoved it into her drawer. Then she turned the lock on her door and sat on the edge of her bed, listening for any sound outside. Footsteps passed down the hall once, slow and heavy. She didn't move until they faded away. Emily knew then that Brian wasn't just trying to make her uncomfortable. He was pushing, seeing how far he could go without anyone stopping him. And with Carl and Linda quietly encouraging it, there was no one in the house who would. Emily was sorting through a pile of mail on the kitchen counter when she noticed an envelope from a bank she didn't use. She almost tossed it aside, but her name printed on the front made her pause. Inside was a welcome packet for a joint savings account. Her stomach tightened when she saw the second name listed under hers, Brian. She flipped to the signature page and felt her chest go cold. The scrawl next to her printed name looked like her handwriting, but it wasn't hers. Her hands trembled as she shoved the papers back into the envelope and went straight to the study. Carl's desk was messy, stacks of papers and manila folders spilling over the edges. She started flipping through them quickly, looking for anything that explained the account. Halfway down the second pile, she found a folder with her name written in neat black marker. Inside were legal documents, trust agreements, property statements. One line in particular stopped her. A portion of Carl's estate would be transferred into a trust in Emily's name only if she married Brian. She stared at the words, trying to process them. It wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was a transaction. Her life tied to Brian's in exchange for money she never asked for. The sound of heels clicking on the hardwood made her look up. Linda was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her. "What are you doing?" Linda's voice was sharp. Emily held up the folder. "What the hell is this? Why is there a trust with my name on it that depends on me marrying Brian? And why is there a savings account I never opened with his name on it?" Linda didn't flinch. "Put that back. You forged my signature." Emily's voice cracked. "Do you even hear yourself? You're tying my life to him on paper." Linda stepped into the room, her expression unreadable. "You're too old to be picky, Emily, and this is the best you'll get." Emily blinked, unsure she'd heard right. "The best I'll get? A man who's been harassing me for months? That's your idea of my future?" Linda's gaze was steady, her tone flat. "You need to stop acting like you're above reality. Carl and I are securing things for all of us. Brian can provide for you, and you'll provide for him. That's how it works." Emily's hands clenched around the folder. "This isn't security. It's a trap." Linda shrugged. "Call it whatever you want. You'll thank me eventually." Emily pushed past her, the documents still in her grip. She could hear Linda calling after her, but the words blurred. All she could think about was the fact that her own mother had put her signature on a life she never agreed to and planned to make her live it. Emily stopped sleeping through the night. She'd lie awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the first sign of footsteps in the hall. Even when she was exhausted, her mind wouldn't shut down. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that joint account, that trust document, and Linda's face telling her it was the best she'd get. She started staying out later just to avoid the house. Sometimes she'd sit in her car in a grocery store parking lot, watching strangers come and go, until she felt too cold to stay there any longer. Work became harder to focus on. She missed deadlines, forgot meetings. Her manager pulled her aside twice, asking if everything was okay, but she couldn't find the words to explain. One rainy afternoon, she left work early and decided to walk instead of driving. She didn't expect to see Rachel coming out of a small bookstore. "Emily?" Rachel said, stopping in her tracks. Emily tried to smile, but it crumbled fast. Her eyes burned, and before she knew it, she was crying in the middle of the sidewalk. Rachel pulled her under the awning and held her until she could talk. "It's worse than I told you," Emily said, her voice shaking. She told her about the forged signature, the trust tied to Brian, the constant pressure. Rachel's face hardened. "You can't just tell people about this. You need proof. Real proof. Documents, messages, recordings. Anything they can't deny." Emily nodded, wiping her cheeks. "I don't even know where to start." "I'll help you," Rachel said. "But you have to be careful. If they know you're onto them, they'll make it worse." Over the next few days, Emily couldn't stop thinking about that. She started looking for things that could expose Brian and Carl, anything to back up her story. That's when she overheard two people talking at a coffee shop while she waited for her drink. Brian's name came up, along with words like HR and settlement. She slid into an empty seat nearby, pretending to scroll on her phone while listening. From their conversation, she learned that Brian had been fired from his last job for harassment. But it never made the news because Carl had paid off the woman who filed the complaint. Emily's hands tightened around her coffee cup. That explained too much, the entitlement in his voice, the way Carl backed him up no matter what. This wasn't just about her. He'd done it before. When she left the shop, the rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy. She knew Rachel was right. If she could find proof of that payout, or anything tying Brian to what he'd done, she'd have more than just her word. She'd have a weapon. Emily knew she had to start taking risks if she wanted to get out of it. The first chance came one evening when Brian followed her into the kitchen while Carl and Linda were in the garage. She slipped her phone into her sweater pocket, screen lit, recording. Brian leaned against the counter, smiling like they were sharing a secret. "You'll see," he said, his voice low. "When you're pregnant, you'll understand what I mean. Everything will fall into place." She forced herself not to react, just nodding slightly while the recording caught every word. Her stomach churned, but she kept her voice neutral until he left. When she played it back later, the sound of his voice made her skin crawl, but it was proof. Her next move was riskier. She bought a cheap phone and filled it with fake messages, made up conversations about her plans and thoughts on Brian. She left it sitting on her bed one morning while she went to the kitchen for coffee. When she came back, Linda was standing by her dresser, holding the phone. "What are you doing?" Emily asked sharply. Linda didn't flinch. "Just making sure you're not making a mistake." Emily took the phone from her without a word, her heart racing. If Linda was snooping, she'd take the bait. It was exactly what Emily wanted. Later that day, she met Rachel at their usual coffee shop. Emily told her about the recording and the decoy phone. Rachel listened, then leaned in. "I've been trying to track down that woman from his old job. I think I found her. She's willing to talk." 2 days later, they met the woman, Claire, in a quiet diner booth. Claire looked tense at first, but relaxed as she spoke. "I was the one who filed the complaint," she said. "They offered me money to sign an NDA. I took it because I just wanted to be done with it, but I still have copies of the emails he sent me, and the NDA itself." Emily felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. "Would you be willing to share them?" Claire nodded. "If it means he won't do it to someone else, yes. I'll send everything tonight." By the time Emily got home, her phone buzzed with an email from Claire, attachments of every message, every threat Brian had sent, along with the legal paperwork showing Carl's payoff. Emily saved the files to multiple places, her laptop, a flash drive, and a hidden online folder. She finally had more than just her word. She had evidence that could tear their entire plan apart. But she also knew the hardest part. Using it was still ahead. Emily knew the only way to end this was to make them believe she had given up. One evening at dinner, she set her fork down, looked between Linda and Carl, and said, "Maybe you're right. Maybe I should give Brian a chance." Linda's face lit up instantly. Carl raised his glass like they'd just won something. "I knew you'd come around," he said. From that moment, Emily played the role they wanted. She smiled when Brian was around, let Linda talk about flowers and venues, and even nodded along when Carl suggested a guest list. All the while, she kept adding to her growing collection of evidence. Every night, she organized the pieces on her laptop. Scans of the forged account papers, the trust document, Brian's texts, the recording of him talking about when she's pregnant, and the emails from Claire. She labeled everything neatly so no one could twist it later. Rachel stayed in the loop, careful to keep their communication off. They spoke in person at busy cafes, passing flash drives like they were nothing more than receipts. Rachel had already contacted a journalist she trusted, someone who dealt with corruption stories and wouldn't be scared off. The engagement party was held at a rented hall downtown, filled with Carl's business associates, Linda's friends, and distant relatives Emily barely knew. Lights hung low over white tablecloths, and a band played soft music in the... Emily wore a dress Linda had picked, smiled for photos, and laughed at jokes she didn't hear. She even let Brian hold her hand for the cameras, though her skin crawled under his touch. Halfway through the evening, while Carl was giving a long-winded speech about family unity, Emily excused herself, saying she needed a moment to freshen up. Instead of heading to the restroom, she slipped out a side door into the cool night air. Rachel was waiting in a parked car across the street. Emily climbed in, her heart pounding, and handed over a small black envelope. Inside was everything, the full dossier she had spent weeks compiling. Rachel checked the contents quickly, then nodded. "I'll get this to her now," she said, meaning the journalist. "By the time the party ends, it'll be out there." Emily got out of the car and walked back toward the hall, her pulse steady now. Inside, Brian was waiting near the door with 2 glasses of champagne, grinning like the future was already his. Emily took one and smiled back, knowing his whole world was about to collapse. Before the night was over, Brian stood at the center of the room, champagne glass raised, the band going quiet behind him. "I just want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate this new chapter," he began, smiling like he owned the place. "Emily and I." A sharp chime cut through his words. Phones all around the room started buzzing at once. People glanced down, and the air shifted almost instantly. Murmurs spread from table to table as screens lit up with the same headline. Prominent businessman's son accused of harassment, fraud ties to father Reby. Emily kept her face neutral, though her pulse jumped. From across the room, she caught Rachel's eye near the door. Guests began scrolling, their expressions changing as they read. Some looked toward Brian. Others turned to Carl. Screenshots of Brian's messages filled the article, late-night texts, the pregnancy comment, the emails to Claire. Below that were images of the forged account documents and the trust agreement, laid out in black and white. The audio clip played automatically in the post, Brian's voice unmistakable. Brian's smile faltered. "This is obviously fake," he said, his voice louder now, almost desperate. Carl moved toward him, hissing something under his breath. But the whispers in the crowd grew louder, chairs scraping against the floor as people started getting up. 2 men in dark suits slipped in through the main doors, followed by uniformed officers. One of them walked straight to Carl. "Mr. Bennett, we need to speak with you about some ongoing investigations." Carl straightened his jacket. "This is a private event," he said coldly. "It won't take long," the officer replied, guiding him toward the exit. Another officer approached Brian. "Sir, we have some questions regarding allegations of harassment and unlawful settlements." Brian's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape. "This is ridiculous. She's lying." His voice cracked, and his gaze landed on Emily, full of sudden hatred. Emily didn't move. She held his stare for a second, then turned away, letting him see that she was no longer afraid. The officers led Carl and Brian outside, the room falling into uneasy silence. Guests began filing out quickly, avoiding Emily's eyes, pretending not to have seen the headline. The band packed up in the corner, the soft clink of instruments breaking the quiet. Linda stood near the bar, pale. Emily didn't answer. She walked straight past her mother, out into the night air, and toward the steps where Rachel was waiting. The noise from inside faded behind her, replaced by the sound of sirens in the distance growing louder. News about the party spread fast. By the next morning, Carl's name was all over local headlines. Reports said his accounts had been frozen while investigators looked into the trust documents and forged signatures. Several of his business partners were already distancing themselves, releasing statements about reviewing their relationships with him. Emily's phone buzzed nonstop for 2 days. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, and finally, Linda's voice in several voicemails. "We need to talk. This isn't what you think. You've ruined everything." Emily didn't listen to the rest. She blocked the number. Brian's face appeared on news sites alongside the words "multiple harassment charges filed." Claire's story was public now, and 2 other women had come forward. Lawyers were circling, each case stronger because of the messages and audio Emily had provided. He wasn't just facing criminal charges, the lawsuits were stacking up. Rachel stayed close through all of it, helping Emily keep her focus on the next step. "We should get you somewhere safe and out of their reach," she said one afternoon. They started looking at apartments, ones far from Linda's neighborhood. A week later, Emily signed a lease for a small but bright place on the edge of the city. For the first time in years, her name was the only one on a legal document connected to her. The first night she slept there, she locked the door and left her phone across the room, no longer afraid of late-night messages. The settlement came sooner than she expected. Investigators found proof that Carl had opened the joint account with Brian using her forged signature and had moved her name into certain investments without consent. His lawyers pushed for a quick resolution to avoid a public trial on that particular charge. When the transfer hit her account, Rachel sat with her at the bank to make sure it was properly secured. "No one can touch this but you," Rachel said, sliding the papers toward her. Emily nodded, feeling the weight of it. The money didn't erase what had happened, but it meant she was no longer trapped under their control. She paid off her student loans in full the next day. Back at the apartment, she unpacked slowly, choosing where each thing would go. The quiet didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like hers. She lit a small candle on the kitchen counter and opened the window, letting the air in. Her phone buzzed once, a text from Rachel, asking how the first night in the new place felt. Emily typed back one word, free. 3 months passed before Emily saw her mother again. She had gone to pick up a few things at a discount grocery store near her new place, pushing a small cart down the narrow aisles. When she turned a corner toward the checkout lanes, she stopped. Linda was standing behind a register, scanning items for a tired-looking couple. Her hair was pulled back messily, and the sharp suits Emily remembered were gone, replaced by a faded polo shirt with the store logo. Their eyes met for just a second. Linda's expression tightened into a glare, full of blame and bitterness. Emily didn't break stride. She kept walking toward the exit with her head high, a small smile on her face. She didn't owe Linda a single word. By then, Carl's downfall was complete. The fraud case had gutted his finances, but Emily had made sure there was no chance for him to rebuild. Months earlier, right after the settlement, she'd stumbled across a folder Carl had hidden in one of his encrypted drives, a list of offshore accounts under fake name. She copied the details onto a flash drive, printed them out, and mailed the packet anonymously to the IRS. She never told Rachel or anyone else about it. A few weeks later, headlines reported that the IRS had frozen multiple overseas accounts linked to Carl Bennett. The numbers in the reports were staggering. Emily knew without a doubt it was the final blow. He'd never have the resources or connections to crawl back into his old life. The rest of her days were quiet in the best way. She worked her regular hours, kept her small apartment in order, and saw Rachel often. The noise and tension that had once filled her life were gone. One Saturday morning, she met Rachel at a little coffee shop they both liked. It was sunny outside, the kind of day where everything felt a little lighter. They sat by the window, watching people pass by, each with their own lives and problems far removed from. Rachel sipped her drink and smiled. So, no regrets? Emily stirred her coffee slowly. Only that I didn't end it sooner. They talked about work, movies they wanted to see, and weekend plans. For the first time in years, there was no undercurrent of fear in their conversations, no careful pauses or glances over shoulders. When they finished their drinks, Rachel asked, "What's next for you?" Emily leaned back in her chair, a faint smile playing at her lips. "Turns out, the best wedding I ever attended was the one that never happened." Rachel laughed softly, and the two of them walked out into the warm air, leaving the past exactly where it belonged behind them.